I'm joined now by Christopher Young. He's the Donald Bren Chair of Non-Western Strategic Thought at the Marine Corps University. Well, just to recap, you've got a U.S. president calling him a rocket man. You've got Kim Jong-un calling him a frightened dog. It's the sort of taunts you and I were talking about. This is stuff you see in the schoolyard.
Yeah. And
then sooner or later, somebody throws a punch. That's the problem. How do you de-escalate this?
Well, I think part of it is happening already. And so you see the Secretary of State's words about saying what the United States' interests are, which do not include invading North Korea, does not include putting troops beyond the 38th parallel, it does not include putting tactical nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, it does not include regime change. And so I think, unfortunately, the president's words, he used some unhelpful words, to be perfectly frank. But I think the way we de-escalate are what the Trump administration is already doing. So you hear what the Secretary of State is doing. You see the United States working with China to try and resolve the issue diplomatically, or to subtly coerce or convince North Korea to back down or to stop its escalatory behavior.
Talk to me culturally, though. I mean, you look at Donald Trump. Here's a guy who's gotten very far by being brash, bluster, and culturally from New York, that goes over just fine. Yeah. But culturally in Asia, saving face is so important. How do you create that off-ramp if you're going to have somebody who's still being provocative on both sides?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question. I think the entire foreign policy community is trying to answer that very question. Being a New Yorker myself, and also from that culture as well, it's entirely possible to understand and learn to not be as brash and not. And hopefully the president's advisors have been giving him tips on how to go about doing that. But I think that's the $100 million question. Our allies would like the president and this administration to say certain types of words. They expect a certain ritualistic behavior in the way we conduct our affairs, the way we interact with other countries. And I think to some degree this is also a learning curve for the president. That is, he's also learning what's working and what's not working. How long that takes is anyone's guess.
Well, I don't know that he has a lot of time. Oh, the DPRK's latest threat, they're going to detonate a hydrogen bomb, at least that's the threat. A nuclear expert at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology called it a truly terrifying thought if something goes wrong. You study this stuff. Give me your thoughts.
So if North Korea detonates a nuclear bomb, actually off of a ballistic missile, so firing a ballistic missile and detonating it out of Korean territory, yeah, that certainly would be a terrifying prospect. But again, it isn't as if the United States military hasn't thought through every possibility. And so what I would say to that is, everyone needs to keep calm and also recognize that if North Korea makes a certain move, the United States has certain flexible deterrent options it could also pursue in response to that. So yes, we seem to be on an escalatory chain, but I'm carefully watching this and seeing as we carefully move up the chain. I don't see anything spinning out of control yet, but certainly we're moving up an escalatory ladder.
What will you be listening to hear tomorrow from the foreign minister from the DPRK? I mean, these are just speeches given before the UN, but there are messages there. Anything that would give you pause or anything that would encourage you if you were listening?
Well, I'm somewhat skeptical that I'm going to hear anything encouraging from the foreign minister of the DPRK. I'm sure he will join in the fray, pointing out some of the language that the president used, and of course he will take every opportunity to talk about the bad things the United States, or the bad policies the United States has pursued. So I'm not particularly hopeful that I'll hear anything from the foreign minister. Now, I think the countries we need to pay attention to, and the reactions are South Korea and Japan. How they've been reacting. Are they lockstep with the United States on that? And I would also point out, how are China and the United States working through all this? I'm heartened to hear that the Chinese have, with regard to the new executive order on the sanctions that the United States has announced, that President Xi has indicated that he's directed the People's Bank of China to comply with that, to work with the United States on those sanctions. So I'm seeing some very hopeful signs on the sides. So I would say that watching the North Korean leadership and the American leadership in a war of words is probably
not the thing to do.
It's not the thing to do because you'll get distracted by what's probably really going on.
We're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much for your observations.